Albrecht is a remarkable man who was always on the outers with everybody in his profession, because every time he wrote a paper, he was always talking about the health of animals and humans instead of getting more bushels. He was the head of the soils department at the University of Missouri from the 1940s and through the 50s and into the early 60s when he retired. He did things like feeding studies on rabbits. And he would show you how if you feed a rabbit from a particular field for 4 generations. Well, see, he did these studies where he'd like take 100 rabbits and he'd put them in cages. And then groups of 100 rabbits, and he'd feed them hay that came from different parts of the state of Missouri, where he came from, where the soil fertility patterns were different. And the rabbits that were eating hay from a heavily rained-on part of the state, where the soils were kind of infertile, in 4 generations became half the size of the rabbits that he started with and had a much shorter lifespan, didn't breed very well, were a sickly-looking bunch. Looked like the people that lived out in that part of the state. The rabbits that he fed on hay that came from a very fertile part of the state, where the rainfall was a whole lot lower, in 4 generations got half again bigger than the rabbits he started with, lived a lot longer, had big litters, were happy, contented rabbits, and the rabbits that were fed sort of in the middle were sort of in the middle. Albrecht pointed out that at the beginning of the Second World War, the American government called in every young man who was over the age of 17 and a half and required that they report for a pre-induction physical to see if they were fit for military service. 1940. They found that in the northwest corner of the state of Missouri, where the soils are fertile, that only 200 out of 1,000 applicants were unfit for military service. In the middle of the state, where there was a lot more rainfall, 300 per 1,000 were unfit for military service. And in the southeast of the state, where there was a great deal of rainfall, 400 per 1,000 were unfit for military service. And the rabbits that were fed on the food from those 3 parts of the state reflected that in just a few generations. You have to keep in mind that in 1940, almost everything that everybody ate came from within 50 miles of where they lived. We were already practicing food miles in those days. Okay. And the health of people in those days reflected the nature of the soils that they lived on. There were some places that people lived longer and some places where people lived shorter. Albrecht started to investigate this and wanted to work out what was the best way to feed animals and human beings so that they lived the longest and were healthiest. And that, of course, became the question, how do I fertilize my soil so that the output has the most nutrition in it that it could possibly have? And Albrecht worked it out.